Welcome to Relationship Matters. It's great to see you all. Good afternoon, Chris. How you doing?
Good afternoon, Mark.
Here we go. Another Friday, another podcast. And boy, we're going to be talking about communication today. And I know that you have a kind of a Jekyll and Hyde relationship with communication. So it should be a great conversation today. We're hoping it's going to be empowering for you, those who are listening. And as you jump on here, as people jump on, we just want you to know you can ask questions. You can join the conversation by posting wherever you found us here today. Just find out, just know when you make a comment in the comment section, it comes into the studio. I can see your comments, and often if you have questions or comments to add to this whole conversation, it'll be awesome. It'll be awesome together. And I'm just looking forward to today's conversation. We've been talking, Chris and I, we've been kind of bantering a little bit about changing the time, because 4 o'clock Alberta time, 3 o'clock BC time doesn't seem to be the best time for people. And we've been getting some feedback. And so we've been kind of bantering. So in the comments, we'd love to hear from you, whether you're watching this live or later on, doesn't matter. We'd like to hear from you. What is the best time of day for you to watch or listen to a podcast? When do you want to do it? Especially if you wanted to, would you prefer evenings, afternoons, or mornings? That's what we need to know. And if you want to throw in there a preferred day, go ahead and do that. Chris, what's your preference?
I am not a morning person.
Right.
So, but then again, this podcast isn't for me, Mark.
Yes.
So,
That's true.
I don't know. I just know that Friday doesn't seem to work well with the feedback I've been getting from folks that have been commenting to me privately.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, we'll work it out. If you got comments, if you're listening to us now, you send Mark an email, send Mark a comment, do something. Let us know, because I don't want you missing any of these empowering conversations.
Yeah, that's, if we look at the stats here and analyze, we're out on several different platforms all at once. We have it on Spotify afterwards. And when I look at the numbers, it's pretty spread even where people find us, but many, many people are watching after the live experience. And so we decided to come back. If you've been listening to the podcast for a while, which I know a lot of you have been here from the beginning, thank you for being part of the Relationship Matters community. It means the world to us, and we're just very grateful. We don't take this for granted, but we are doing this to empower people and to encourage people. And so make sure you share it out. If you have people, if we're touching on a subject other people need to hear too, we really encourage you to share it out, invite others to watch it. And but what we want to do, this season, the first season I did it live and I had guests. The second season I pre-recorded and had guests. And now this year we decided to add a co-host, which is my best friend, Chris Dollinger. And we were going to do live, and then where we could get guests, they might drop in, or I might interview somebody and then just play the interview. So we're experimenting, and we want to hear from you. We want to hear your input. What format you love best, what day. If you were to watch live, when would you want to watch it live? Because what I find, Chris, I don't know about you, but when we have live people watching us live and they comment and they ask questions, it creates another level of dynamic to the podcast that I think is pretty exciting. And it's been really good, because I know, a couple of weeks ago, Gary Chupik, who's a fantastic, elite mindset guy, he was asking questions, and it just brought stuff out of me, and that's kind of what you do as well for me. But yeah, I'm just wondering, do you find it's a cooler dynamic when people are on with us live?
Ironically, interesting question for our topic today when it talk about
Yeah.
communication, right?
Yeah.
Anytime,
Exactly.
anytime you can get a group of people together and have a dialogue, I think that brings a new dynamic
Yeah.
into the conversation. Sometimes maybe a little wild, sometimes a bit of conflict. at the end of the day, I think what's important is that everybody gets a chance to have some communication and dialogue around what the topic is. I like it, and
Yeah.
I like comments, I like questions, I like thoughts, ideas. So the more we'll get people engaged with us, the
Yeah.
more our overall Empowering Conversations podcast will
Yeah.
be dynamic. So jump in, folks, anytime.
Yeah.
Remember, sharing is caring.
That's a good one. Sharing is caring. Come on, people. Well, I know that it is better. I like it. I'm a relational guy, so I like to have people online and joining us. So, it's really good. I think it helps the whole overall experience. So, as we said, we're going to be looking to shift the time and day um, for this, just to make it more available to more people to come online and watch with us and comment and join us in the conversation. And by the way, if you have a compelling relational story, or a testimony of relationships being healed, please reach out to me. We would love to hear from you, because we're happy to interview. We love having guests on, and so yeah, please feel free to reach out to us. You can make a comment here, or you can email me, mark@markgordon.ca, and we can find a spot for you. Or go on, you can see my website there, markgordon.ca. You can go on there and just reach out through the website. But we would love to have you on as a guest. I'm always looking for guests, and I think that would be great. It's fun. So,
Yay.
Chris, communication. Probably, one of the most overused things, and also underutilized. Like I said in the introduction to this online, I said that communication can make or break relationships. Really, it can make it flourish, or it can make it fail. and and it's such an important one with the five pillars. It's a central pillar. It's in the middle, because I think it kind of affects all the other pillars. And so I just I thought we should have a conversation about this as we're trolling and walking through these pillars. Communication could be one of the most important. Do you think?
Well, I think it starts with communication, because you can have all the trust and all that other stuff that we have on your pillars, but that just sits there until you communicate,
Yeah.
right? And you can communicate in many different ways, right? So I think that
Right.
communication, and we see it in the business world. It's all about clear, concise communication. It's
Yeah.
about transparency in the communication. It's
Mhm.
about consistent communication, and so on and so forth. So I like what you said, Mark. It's an overused term that at the end of the day, it's almost like the term customer service. Everybody says they give
Right.
customer service in business,
Right.
but what is that? Because it's just, oh, I give great customer service. We give great customer service. That's almost like an overused term. Same with
Right.
almost communication. And yet, if you
Well,
don't
the question
communicate,
is, the question is, can you communicate effectively, or can you have effective customer service and not communicate, or not know how to communicate? I mean, I think about some of the call centers nowadays, and how there's so many layers that they keep the customer away. Like, they want to send you online so that a little person pops up and starts talking to you. It's a bot, but it's there. And so I find that I am more loyal to companies where I can actually talk to somebody. I can actually communicate, and I get an answer. I actually have people communicate back to me.
yeah, but you and I are crusty old guys. The millennials today and the younger generation has no interest in talking to anybody except through a text or through some type of an online thing. And I think that that's when we talk about communication, and I'm sort of staying on the business theme, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
and that is the question is the live conversation, the connection of conversation. I believe that'll never go away. I think everybody still needs that. The problem is the preference based
Yeah.
on lifestyle, based on what comfort zone and everything has us shifting to take a look at your cell phone for a moment and like that, and take a look at how many text messages versus
Yeah.
phone calls you have,
Yeah, for
right?
sure.
And I think that again, I think as we talk about communication next generation of what that looks like.
Right.
Can you, and we'll talk maybe later about this, but can you continue to create effective communication via text messaging versus great communication
Right.
via live person to
Yeah.
person and everything like
Well,
that? And my fear, Mark, my
yeah.
fear
Yeah.
is that we'll start to continue to rely on this to the point where we'll just tell Siri to talk it for us, and then that'll send the message out. We won't even
Yeah.
type anymore, and so we'll just end up being so lazy. We just walk back and like, hey, tell Mark to do this. And
Right.
anyway,
Well, or even worse, AI takes over and communicates for us, right? And that we've seen some of that happening. I, you know,
ooh, are you gonna, Mark? Are you getting into conspiracy theory stuff now?
no, no
Ooh,
conspiracy theories, but we
good.
all know we all know that AI can. There is deep fakes and there is ways of copying my voice. I'm working right now with somebody who I'm going to put my book in audio version, but I don't have time to sit in a microphone and just read the whole thing. And I'm using AI. I read one chapter, it mimics my voice, and it takes the whole book and does it in like minutes. And
Yeah,
so, that's so it is. But my question is, with this onslaught like of texting and communicating through that, are we teaching our young people, those millennials, are we teaching people how to actually communicate emotion, communicate in a way that you can hear each other? Because texting is the worst form of communication in terms of trying to effectively get an emotion communicated or something you're going through communicated. But it's very efficient for one-way information in terms of work. Just getting, passing. Hey, I'm on my way home today. Why pick up? Why do a whole phone thing when you can just text it? But my fear is that we have not taught the next generation how to communicate well, how to actually have a heartfelt conversation, a connected conversation. And that's what I think is lost in text, email. Sure, we might have efficiency in information, but are we having efficiency in uh, in in connection? And I would say not.
yeah. I funny when I talk to young people, and Lori and I are active with lots of young people in our lives and everything. When I talk to young people overall, again, being an older guy and everything like that, I find very quickly that if you are authentic, if you are, caring, if you are, you know, um, just communicating well, just being who you are.
Mm.
Well, first of all, with anybody that's fine, but with a younger person, very quickly they engage. Very quickly they engage, and you can learn a lot from each other as you talk that way. So it's not that, excuse me for targeting millennials. I know everybody's always
Yeah,
targeting
yeah,
millennials, but the younger generation, it's not so much that shame on you for texting all the time and
no,
you should be better and not do that. No, 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 no. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that we use texting and it becomes a bit of a crutch. But at the same time, I find that when you engage, and I think that's the power of communication, right, Mark? The
yeah,
power of communication is the moment you talk, the moment you yourself, all kinds of things happen. You just said, hey, people, we're going to ask you to text us some questions, right? But they're going to
yeah,
engage with us. Even through that, we're going to be able to engage. So
yeah.
communication, I mean, I think you and I could spend a whole hour just on what we're talking about.
Yeah, we
But I think
could,
we've got lots more to talk about. But
but
communication is fundamental.
my thing is that even for clients that I have, whether it's workplace or home place, I have had people tell me, and then and then they said this, and they said this, and they did this, and they called me this, and then it all of a sudden dawns on me as the way they're talking. It's like, is this in person, like actually face to face? Or is this on text? And no, on text. But they're talking like it's actually a conversation. And I and I'll always laugh and I'll just say, on text you can't tell. The only thing you can do to yell is do all caps. But there's no
Yeah.
other way of actually expressing what you're feeling in an appropriate way through texting. And so I have seen so many times where people misunderstand the tone of somebody's voice through texting, and they're having this massively important conversation about relationship and about things that are going on, and they don't actually take the time. And I think one of the reasons is the same reason why social media is so can be so damaging. It um, is because people fear conflict, and it's easier just to send a text to get your point across than looking somebody in the eye and sharing your heart. And I think that that is damaging to relationships. I think it hurts relationships both at work and at the workplace and at home. And I think that that is my concern with it, is that if we're going to communicate effectively, remember, we got to remember, communication is more than talking. It's
Yes.
more it's more than talking. It's We're communicating all the time. It's both nonverbal and verbal, and it's always bi-directional. So
Yeah.
I'm always communicating something, but if I remove my facial expression, if I remove my body language, if I remove those kinds of things in my life, in my communication, then I'm left to just the text. I'm not communicating half of what, or three quarters of what I could be communicating with a simple facial expression of concern or care or whatever. And so it can come across like I'm being harsh when I'm not being harsh. And
Yeah.
so I think that that is important. I want to show you a study that was done here. And I'm going to hang on for a second. Got to find it. Okay. So I'm going to just add this to our stage here. Yeah. Okay. So Harvard or some place, university did a study. Now this was in a marketing class. Okay. So it's a business class in a marketing part of part of the course. And they did some studies. Now, this isn't comprehensive, of course, and it's related to business, but it's interesting. Okay. So here's what they came up with. There's 7% value, there's 55% value, and there's 38% value. Which of these would you assign to that, Chris? Would tone of voice, words, and body language? Those are the three major components of communication and how we communicate. What value would you assign to each of those out
So
of
those
50?
values that you show on the screen are not the correct ones, right?
Yes, they are, the percentages are right, but which one would you put tone of voice in 38 or 7 or 55? Would you put the words you speak in 7, 38, or
Yeah.
55?
So
Uh,
tone of
Yeah.
voice 55, words 38, and body language 7. That's me.
Okay. Here's what the actual study showed. Words we speak were 7% of the value of communication. 55% was body language, 38% was tone of voice.
Oh, I
Now,
blew that test.
well, that's okay. Everybody does. But here's the deal, Chris. My point in showing this is that texting removes two of those. Emails remove two of those. So now we're just left with the words. So if we're just using words to communicate and we strip away tone of voice and body language, we better be effective with those words. we better like we
Absolutely.
better like we better over communicate with the words. But what is the tendency? To use emojis, to have abbreviated terms that you assume the other person knows. Again, I'm an old guy, so I may not know, but I know BRB is be right back. So but how do we, if we're trying to make connection, remember this is about building relationship, maintaining relationship, having a flourishing relationship. If we remove the two biggest contributors to that communication of connection, we're in trouble.
Yeah,
And that's interesting, isn't it?
it is. It is. I know I have my boss is probably one of the best people I know who has the ability to read body language so well. And it is amazing
Yeah.
how that form of communication is so effective and the way he uses that and everything. I sometimes try to make sure that I don't give him any body language when I'm talking if I'm a little bit excited and stuff like that. And the guy can just read through it all. It's hilarious. So it is, body language is a key, right, of communication.
Right? It's such a key to communication, and I think that is something in the business world that people don't understand. At home, yes, okay, but let's talk. We've been talking about business today. We'll get to the home stuff in a minute. I walk into a shop or store, and this is just recently. I walked into the shop to get something, and the person behind the counter did not want to be there. Now, they hadn't spoken one word to me, but I can tell you, I can walk in and say, that person does not like working here. They don't want to be here. They don't want to be on shift, and they certainly don't want to serve me. And I could tell that by their body language. And then when they did speak, their tone of voice. And it didn't matter what words they spoke at that point. They could have a script of what they're supposed to say to, you know, welcome to the happy place. We're all here to serve you. But it's not going to mean a hill of beans because the body language was so out.
Yeah.
And I think if businesses spent a little more time on training on communication, uh, we would be able to see the level of customer service that they truly want. See, even call centers, if it's a phone call, at least you have tone of voice. You may not have body language, but you got tone of voice. You've heard the term. You can always, always smile when you're talking on the phone because they can hear a smile. It's
Yeah.
the same. It's the same idea. But if we remove 2/3, or well, more than that, 93% of communication tools, and then just try to text with just words, we're just not going to be able to make the connection that we need to have a flourishing relationship, no matter where it is.
Exactly. Exactly. So, Mark, a lot of our listeners, I mean, obviously participate, obviously have jobs and work, and so communication at work is important. But why don't we dig into communicating from whether it's at home or with our friends or with our significant others, our children, and everything like that. Of course, that's a place that you're always involved with, and a lot of times is that whole
Yeah.
communication breakdown. Let's jump into that, okay? Because I think we could have a couple of fun little conversations around that.
Yeah. Well, it's the same principle, but you can apply this to any relationship. And but there's a few things that we need to understand. One is, it's like I said, it's more than talking. It's verbal and nonverbal, and it's always bi-directional. So whether you know you're communicating or not, you're communicating with your body, with your tone, with everything. Uh, Also, I think it's important to understand good communication is to listen to understand. Don't just listen to hear the information, listen to understand each other's hearts. So in family dynamics, a lot of times communication breaks down because of conflict, because we don't actually take the time and show the body language. Like, let me give you an example. It's one thing to say, Chris, you are my, Chris, I got to talk to you. Can we just talk for a minute? I just want you to know how important you are to me. You're such a great friend, right? That felt warm. You felt connected. Like, wow, that's a really good thing. Or I could say, yeah, Chris, you're really important to me, and you're a really good friend. Let's get going. Like, there's a very different tone of that. Or like with my wife, honey, I love you. Look at me. Look at my face. I love you. Or it's like, yeah, I love you. See ya. I'm going out the door. Right? Like, there's a big difference on how we communicate. Children, especially if you're a parent, they need you to listen, to understand. And and here's the connection, Chris. When someone is heard, they feel valued.
Yeah.
When someone is heard, they feel valued. And a lot of times in our conflicts, what happens is we shut down, we get defensive in our posture, in our body language, in our tone of voice, we get defensive. Whereas, what if we just slowed down and we listened to understand, and we actually validated somebody's words, what they were saying? They're trying to express that they're in pain in some way. I had to learn this with Sandy, where I just need to listen to her because it validates. And when she's heard, she feels valued. And then I've earned the right to actually, I always say there's perception's reality, but it's not always actuality. And so I earned the right to share the actual, what my intent was, what my heart was, when I actually listen first. And I listen to understand, not just to hear the information. Because as soon as I just hear information, I get all defensive because it must be my fault. Sometimes it has nothing to do with me. I just need to listen. So in family dynamics, communication's so important, to use that body language, to use the tone of voice. Understand that tone of voice is everything. Honey, could you take the garbage out for me? Sure, sweetheart. Or it's like, hey, take the garbage out. Like, which one am I going to respond to? Right? Like, you're going to respond to the one where tone of voice is used, and it's much more effective communication, because we want to listen more when we actually use that tone of voice and body language. I use this, Chris. I always say, if you have to have a tough conversation, set the table first. Just like you're going to have a good meal, set the table first. You don't just throw the food on the thing and everybody rah. You, we set the table so that we've earned the right to have that conversation. And so it's really important in communication to set the table. Like, hey, I've got something I got to talk to you about. It's going to be a bit tough. I'm a little nervous about it, but I'm having this conversation with you because I care about you and I love you. And I want to make sure that you understand this, that I'm not attacking you. There's nothing. I'm just telling you how I feel. That is going to be very different than saying, hey, you messed up and we're going to have a talk, young man or young woman. Like, you know, it's going to be very different. You got to set the table if you want to have a difficult conversation. And you use body language and tone of voice to set the table. And then you've earned the right. Then you can share whatever you need to share. Thoughts?
Exactly. Well, listening to understand is a real big deal, and especially for someone like myself,
Yeah.
because I'm like, just get to the point. Like,
Yeah.
I don't need a lot of stuff. Okay, so when it comes to listening to understand, one of the as my wife has so many wonderful traits, and one of the things about it when she talks is you're going to really get a good understanding of what she's trying to communicate with you. She's going to share a lot of good things with you. You're going to be enraptured in her story, or if she's telling me how her day is going, she's gonna provide a there's you're not going to be confused about how it went. Why? Because it sort of goes like, well, this morning when I got to work, I made a K-reg and I put a little extra cream in it, and then I sat on the red chair, and what I did is Cindy came over and we talked about. So the story goes on and on. So
Details.
so
Details.
and it actually, for most people, that's no problem. They want to hear the story, but you get a guy like me who's like, land the plane. Okay, like what and it basically, at the end of the story, it was just like, we had the bathroom breakdown. That was the whole
Yeah.
context of the bathroom broke.
Okay. But Chris, let's take this now and elevate it into a conflict. If
Well, what do you
you're
mean?
if you and Lori are in a conflict, so she's not now telling you a nice story about her day with a bunch of
Okay,
detail.
yeah. So
She's
now it's not.
redhead. The redhead came out, and
Yeah,
now she's trying to get a point across, and you're like, just solve the problem. Just
just
get to the
land the plane and
land the
get to the
plane.
point.
Yeah, how's that working for you, by the way?
Oh, but listen, I've been told through in my business career, through most of my life, I'm a really good communicator. At home, I don't know where the disconnect happens and everything, but it's that listening to understand
Yeah,
is for someone that's like, when I communicate, I want to be heard. I want everybody to listen to all my juicy details and my little antidotes and everything. And then all of a sudden, someone's talking to me, and I'm like, land the plane, get to the point. Let's fix it.
sure.
And you're right, in the conflict, I'm a guy. My wife wants to share about the struggles and trials and all whatever they are during the day,
Yeah,
and I'm like, well, let's fire that person, and then you know what, you should do that, and you should do this, and you should do that.
yeah.
And so my communication is like, point blank. Let's get the
He's
spreadsheets out, the whiteboard out. Let's get a flow chart going about what we're going to do to solve the
right.
problem. And just like, so the other day, I actually practiced that. It
Oh,
was
good.
it was great. It was like she was sharing, and the story was about 2.5 hours long, and well, that's what it felt like. Sorry, and then
Probably 2.5 minutes, but yeah.
yeah. And but I'm saying, Chris, listen to understand, like listen to her, because hey, she's super important to me, and I
Yeah.
want to try to become better too, right? So I'm
Yeah.
listening, and I'm listening about how red the apples were and the cinnamon on them and how good they tasted, and I'm listening to all the things that are going on there, and I just wanted to solve the problems. It was like I can solve the problems in 3 steps. Just give me three, boom, 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 I'll get it done. But I just sat and kept leaning forward to make sure I heard. And what I found about that is it really actually made the conversation great, and I learned a little bit more.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to say that
Well,
it was compromise. I don't want to say it was compromise. I'm saying it's authentic,
yeah.
just not natural for me. Because here's how it goes with Lori. Lori talks to me and she goes, "Hey, Chris, you know what? Why don't we, we should take a look at doing something like this." And my first answer to everything is no,
Yeah.
no, no. I think it's a dumb idea. No, I don't like it. No, I don't have time with it. Automatic.
Yeah.
So, but in communicating with me, Lori knows this, and yet she still goes, "Hey, Chris, why don't we go here today and do this?" And my first answer is
Nope.
no. So, reversing that, I'm trying to figure out how to not to just react and
Right.
say no. Is to
Uh,
sort of say, here's the
yeah.
question. Instead
You
of being
said
all analytical and everything like that, just say, okay, there's a
yeah.
question. Answer the question.
You said something very important that I think we need to just pause on for a minute because this can be very powerful. You said it's not natural, but it was authentic. Here's the deal. Even if you were trying to fake it till you make it, even if you were trying to, you weren't authentic in your desire to listen to understand, you were just appeasing her. If you're just anybody that's just appeasing somebody, your body language will give you up every single time. You're not leaning in, you're sarcastic, you're making jokes. Including if she says let's go do something and you think to yourself like you actually have a moment where you think first before opening your mouth, um, which I know is rare, but anyway, when that happens, when that happens, and you think, oh, I should, yeah, I'm going to get in trouble if I say no to this, so you do it, but your body language says you don't want to be there. You don't want to be doing what you're doing. You're miserable. And then you wonder why she gets angry at you. Well, I came with you. I did what you wanted me to do. But people, and I'm using example just because you brought it up, but I'm saying this is what people do all the time.
I
They
know.
try to fake it till they make it. I always say, don't fake it till you make it. Be authentic. Declare it until you believe it if you need to. But you got to start to listen to understand, and then yes, do a check down. You said it wasn't compromise. Well, there's nothing wrong with compromise if it's authentic. If you do a check down and say, you know what, I want to bless my wife. I want to make her feel valued. I want to make her know that she's the most important person in my life. I'm going to go and have fun at this thing for her sake. That's being authentic. I don't even mind saying, I don't really want to go, but I'm going to go because I want to bless you and I'm going to have a good attitude in it because I don't want to communicate with my body language when let me put it this way, when your face and your body disagree with your words, trust is breached. We
Yeah.
talked about trust last week. That's a withdrawal. That's a withdrawal out of the trust bank. When your face and your body says something different than your words are saying, when there's no alignment, it is absolutely damaging. So what we want to do is we want to make sure we're aligned, even if that takes a few minutes. And that's where set the table. Say, honey, I'm really uncomfortable with that, but I just know it's so important to you. I'm going to come and I'm going to do my best. That is all that your spouse wants from you. And
Yeah.
and so this is where communication breaks down because a lot of guys don't know how to express that, especially a lot of guys, sometimes girls too. But what happens is what we do then is we put up kind of these nonverbal walls. We put up this resistance in with our attitude or with our body language or our facial expressions, and and then we make it worse, and it just the tension grows. You can feel the tension growing in between you, and pretty soon it's like a full on battle. And
Yeah.
by the time you're done the fight, you don't even remember why you started fighting in the first place. You'd have to go all the way back to the morning and realize, you know what? I said yes, but my body and my face said no. And that caused tension all day. I need to take responsibility for my part. You
Yeah.
know, I think I've said it on the show before, but it's just worth saying again. In especially in the communication bend, when I grew the most is the same coin, two sides. I started taking responsibility for what I said and what my attitude was and what my heart was. So I had to take responsibility for my words, my body language, and my tone of voice. I had to start doing that. And I was an angry guy, remember. You knew me back
Yeah.
then. And so my tone of voice could be very sharp and cutting. And then I would say, what? I try to excuse it or justify it. And what I realized is I had to actually align my words with my body, with my tone. When I had alignment, I was authentic. And when I had that alignment and I was authentic, I was the best person I could be. So I had to take responsibility for my actions, for my alignment, if I could put it that way. The other side of that coin is I had to stop taking responsibility for Sandy's alignment, for her side.
Yeah.
I'm not responsible for how she took something or what she might be going through on a given day. My responsibility as a husband is just to make sure she's cared for and loved, and that is expressed to her. So in a scenario where she's asking me to do something I don't want to do, I have to actually think it through and say, as a husband, what is my responsibility here? It's to bless my wife. It's to make her know that she's cared for and loved. So you know what? I'm going to go to this event and I'm going to align my words and my body and my tone of voice, and we're going to have a good time because I'm doing it to bless my wife. It takes all of the regret, the resentment, it takes all the vile stuff out of it because now I'm on side and I'm doing it out of the kindness of my heart because of who I am, not because of her demand. Does that make sense? So when I
Yeah.
take responsibility for her side, I'm going to squeeze and I'm going to, oh, I don't, this isn't comfortable. I'm going to complain. I'm going to have a grumpy face on. I'm not going to, I'm not going to be uh, the person she needs me to be in that moment. And you know
So
what?
Mark,
Just,
hey
just
Mark,
to
hey
say,
Mark,
yeah,
Mark, do me a favor. Continue on that thread for a little bit. Lori's just leaving for a ladies' retreat, and I'm going to go give her a hug and
ah,
say
good,
goodbye. Okay. So
good
just carry
move.
on because I got something just to
Yeah,
talk about right after that. Okay.
I will. I'll
Be right
carry
back.
on. Yeah. See that right there was the best decision Chris could make, right? Because it's relational and it's communicating love and affection for his wife because he's in the middle of something here. It might have been a business meeting, it might have been a podcast recording. He's in the middle of this, but he prioritized her. So that's a great way of communicating. He doesn't have to go up there and say, "Hey, honey, I just am missing a live podcast broadcast, so I could say goodbye to you, so you feel good." That's not that's the wrong attitude. He wanted to go and say goodbye to her, give her a kiss, say I'll miss you, and guess what? He doesn't have to use words. His body language and his tone of voice and his actions spoke louder than any words would have spoken. And so that's kind of what we're talking about here today. Communication is always verbal, always nonverbal, always bidirectional, and it's always a tool to put deposits in the trust bank to build up those pillars in your relationships so that they can flourish. And that's really what we're talking about today. And I just think it's so important if you can learn to listen to understand rather than just listen to hearing the information or listening enough to get, so that you can move on to what you want. um, it's going to be a lot better than that. So, hey, if you're watching, make sure you comment. There's been people in and out here. Uh, how do you communicate love? How do you communicate that affection? How do you listen to understand? Maybe you got some tips or you got some questions. Make sure that you put them in the comments. They should come right into the studio here. Sometimes LinkedIn, if you're on there, doesn't work, but put them anyway because I look at it later and then I'll answer those questions. And it'd be really good to hear from y'all and and have your contribution to this conversation, because communication is so important. We've got to keep we got to keep working at it. I think it's I call it, you've heard life skills. I believe it's an essential skill. Communication is something to worth investing in. How'd that go, Chris?
Good, good. She's off a whole weekend of fun with ladies from the church. Whatever they all do, I don't know, but I know I have to look after the dog and try to find food.
And pull the guitar out and crank that amp as
Oh,
loud as
I
you
got
want
it
it.
all set up. It is going to get loud this weekend. Def Leppard, all the treats are coming out this weekend. Um, anyways, Mark, a point I wanted to bring across,
Yeah.
which I think happens a lot in our podcast, is there's going to be people sitting there going, wow, my goodness, is there a lot to do when it comes to trying to figure out how to align yourself with those 5 pillars? And we've only talked about 2, like last week.
Yeah.
Like, how do I build trust, and what are all these mechanisms? And now you guys are saying communication, and do this and do that, and make sure you're doing this. What I wanted to bring up was, I think the first step to anything that we're going to ever talk about on this podcast
Yeah.
starts with awareness.
Yeah.
And one of the things I'm going to do is, people may not see this, but I don't know if you can see that, but this is called the blind spot.
Yeah.
And I did this 3 years ago through your website, Mark. This is a
Yeah.
service you offer
It's free.
in terms, yeah, I used it for my staff, for
Yeah.
example.
Yeah.
And what quickly, I'm not going to get into a pitch on this, but quickly what it was is that you answered these wild questions that you think you can trick the questions, but you can't.
Yeah.
And you answer this, and it spits out this thing and says, this is kind of how you operate. For
Yeah.
me, I was an analyzer, was my behavior style. But what was interesting about this is when I talk about awareness, because we can't have a 17-page document that says, if you're going to be a good communicator, this is the document you have to read and know every single thing about it, because people, it's difficult.
Yeah.
But awareness,
Yes.
check this out. Analyzer, Chris
Yeah.
Dollinger,
Yeah.
my potential blind spots. People can easily annoy you, Chris, especially those who tend to have a more emotional and intuitive style. When I read that the first time, I went like this. I went, how did this thing know me, right? Like this. But think about that for just 1 second. I'm going to break
Yeah.
this down quickly for 1 second. That brought awareness, because
Right.
I never, nobody ever said that to me. It's like, yeah, if you're all goo goo gaga and gummy bears and unicorn and fields of flowers kind of individual, I'm having a hard time connecting with you and communicating with you.
Right.
And then it says, others might become gun shy about communicating with you because you might find yourself being critical of others, especially of their performance. And as a result, you come across arrogant and demeaning. I never think of myself as arrogant. I think of myself as confident, and so on and so forth. But when I'm saying awareness. So here's
Yes.
this thing about awareness and everything like that. And it's saying to me, people annoy you or easily annoy you, so you tend to, especially those that tend to have an emotional, intuitive style. Well, guess what kind of style my wife has?
Oh yeah. She'll be a
You know, so
peacemaker.
so the awareness. I think that today, if you're looking at this 27 or 17-page thing that you think you have to figure out in order to be a communicator, let's
Yeah.
just start with awareness.
Yeah.
Become aware of the type of the way you communicate. And a part of that, I definitely would say to everybody, jump on the website and do this, because
Yeah.
you may say to yourself, this is quite wild. And again, it will help with the awareness, but try to figure out how to become aware. Once you're aware, then you can start with the smaller stuff, like the just simple stuff, like my tone of voice.
Yeah.
Or like if Lori's talking to me about how bad of a day she's having, and I'm like, yeah, so tell me about it, hun. Yeah, this is great. Land the plane, land the plane. I mean,
And you don't even have to say the words. Your body language will say land the plane.
absolutely.
Right?
So I don't know what you think about that, because
Yeah.
you teach a
Well,
lot. out there. But but awareness
Yeah,
first.
I think awareness is a huge piece of this, because if we're not aware, if we're left unaware, we default back to old patterns. So when the more we can do, the more anybody could do to bring awareness into their life, the more um, confidence they'll grow in, the more better communicator they'll be. Most bad communicators are or people who like to dominate other people. Usually, it's not because they're bad people or want to hurt people. It's that's their style. It's their personality style. Can come from our childhood. Can come from many things, and we just need to be more aware. So now that you know that, you can be aware and guard yourself a little bit, saying, "Hey, I've got to give some space here for emotions." Like even in the workplace, that's why this is so powerful for teams. I'll do this blind spot assessment with a team, and then I go in and I do some coaching and I talk to them about how do you get along with an analyzer? How do you get along with an energizer? What do you do? Well, here's some things. What kind of approach should you have with those kind of people? Well, here's a good approach to have. So now you've got awareness. It actually starts to naturally happen. I had one team that I did this with, and they were blown away by it initially, but you forget things you learn, right? But they said that it stuck enough that it became very natural for them just to be, when they felt this little offense rise up, they realized, oh shoot, hang on, they're communicating in their style. I got to go back and look at what theirs is. And, they would just look and get, oh yeah, okay, that's why it's not personal. See, a lot of times we take it personally, like
I know.
that people are, trying to hurt us or trying to offend us, especially in conflict. And so, yeah, it's so important to communicate in a way that you can do. So the other thing I often say is, so we want to listen to understand. We also want to speak from our heart, not our pain. And this is, people always ask me, what does that mean? Well, when we speak from our heart, we're speaking from our authentic self. We are, and we understand that we have the skills, we have the ability, we can share our hearts. It's not that I can never share my heart with my wife because I'm scared I'm going to offend her, but I can use I language that will help. I feel this way, you know, and I'm feeling this way. It doesn't mean that she caused it or vice versa, right? It doesn't mean that the other person caused it, but it's really important to understand that we want to share from our heart and not our pain. When we share from pain, it's angry. It's you did this. It's you language. You did this, and then you did that, and it's poor communication because we're not taking responsibility anything for ourselves. Whereas, so let me give you an example of this I language thing. So I'm going to use an example right now. Let's say my wife yelled at me for something. I could say, "You're always yelling," or I could say, when I'm yelled at, I feel hurt. And when I feel hurt, I get defensive. And when I'm defensive, I tend to yell back to the person. And I don't want us to yell at each other anymore. So could we agree not to yell at each other? That's going to be received way better than me saying, "You always yell. You're always putting me down. You're always," right? That you language. So I always say you language escalates and I language de-escalates.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well,
But it starts with awareness.
and I printed this off because I know that I had asked you to send it to me. I didn't have a copy. I wanted this a while back, and you sent it to me. And that third point right there is what helped me become aware for when Lori went into what
Right.
I thought was a very long story about the day,
Yeah.
and allowed me to listen to understand.
Right.
And okay, did I have I done that the entire week in every conversation? Probably not. But it's got me now thinking a little bit
Yeah.
to the point where, and the other part about that too is do you care enough about what you're doing or who you're talking to even want to try and
Right.
become better by the awareness? Like at work, do you feel that you know um, uh, I've got some coworkers, that I probably don't get along very well with. I think other people have coworkers that they don't get along with well. And my immediate reaction is, well, you're all dumb, so I don't care,
Yeah.
so like that. But that doesn't work in a team environment, right?
No.
And as a leader in what I do in the organization, I mean, that's a terrible thing, right?
Yeah.
So the question is how do you, you're aware of it, and then how do you make sure? And what I've found is that I've said to myself, well, I care enough about the overall what we're doing as a company, in the marketplace, and I care enough about that individual's department,
Yeah.
because of how effective they are to help me. So why be a thorn in the side when all I have to do is listen to understand and communicate in a way like I'm not a good communicator. Like I can't. I'm not really good at that. I'm the guy that says stop yelling at me, right? Because
Yeah.
it's practical. Just stop yelling at me. That makes sense, but not.
Yeah.
I want you to know
Yeah. Yeah.
that
Yeah.
and I'm not that guy, and yet at the same time there's nothing wrong with that, and it's kind of like I just need to take a step back, and being aware has given me the chance.
Yeah.
And even in this podcast, as we've been talking about last week about trust and everything, it's just remembering certain things. Today I realized that I've been a real dork when it comes to talking to a certain individual that's really important to me, not a family member or anything like that. And so I was
Yeah.
actually in the car after a lunch meeting driving along, and that thought came into my head. And I said to myself, you know what? I'm going to stop being a dork. I'm going to stop talking the way I talk to that individual.
Yeah.
Because we're a couple of guys, we're a couple of peacocks, we're always posturing, we're always like this and everything. And I thought, I don't need to do that. Now, how effective that'll be is all about, again, being aware of that next time I have a
Yeah.
conversation. The immediate DNA says, let's peacock, I'm better than you, da 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 da, right? And, to bolster that down. So I don't know,
Yeah.
Mark. I'm all over the place today. I'm all over the place.
That's all right. But you make good points, and that is, that it is important. So we want to listen to understand. We want to speak from the heart. And speak from the heart doesn't mean all mushy feely, but speak from the heart is just to be authentic and clear. And then I think the next one that's important to understand, probably is to um, hang on here, is is to find that empathy within yourself. So when awareness kicks in, what you want to do um, is is to practice empathy, and that's where how would I feel if I was being talked to this way? That's that awareness thing again. By the way, awareness, you can have a 360 approach. I would ask people you trust, how do I present when I show up in a room? How do I present when I show up in a meeting? And just get some feedback. Don't get defensive. Just get some feedback so you can learn.
Whoa, Mark, I did that one time at work.
Yeah, how'd it
And
go?
I did it with a care group that I was involved with too.
Yeah.
And everybody got to write down. I was a sad Chris. I was a sad Chris because when everybody got to write it down anonymously so that I couldn't go after them. And yeah, you want to talk about awareness. Now
Yeah.
that was years and years and years ago
Yeah.
when I was in some kind of a gong show mode in my life and everything. But
But it
boy,
jarred you. It woke
oh,
you
and I
up.
still I still can remember it to this day. And as a matter of fact, the
Yeah.
one group where we put their names on it, I can still remember the names of the individuals that said,
Yeah.
"This guy's a terrible boss. He's a terrible communicator." Da
Right.
da da da. Da. And I'm like, "What?"
Yeah.
Kind of.
Well, and I would say that, we've known each other a long time, and you've improved dramatically in that arena. But it's the point is, it is just a 1% improvement every day. Like, it's not like you have to, we teach these things, and I teach them all the time, and it sounds like such a high thing to reach, but it's actually not. It's just little practices, right?
Yeah.
And you just start with little things, and awareness is a big one. Like, you can just little awarenesses, you can have a heart to heart with your wife and say, hey, how, when I'm upset, what are you feeling? What are you thinking? Right? for us to hear, well, I'm kind of scared of you, that would be like, whoa, that was never
Whoa.
my intent. I would never want them to, but I got to face it. I think we got to start getting some backbone. I think conflict is often seen as negative. However, I've always believed it's an opportunity to go deeper in a relationship. It's an invitation to go deeper. Max Lucado says in one of his books, he says, conflict is inevitable, but combat is optional.
Good
And
one.
and I
Yeah.
really and I really like that. It's like, if you want to be a good communicator, we got to learn how to communicate through conflict, because that's where communication generally breaks down. It's either we get very defensive, or we shut down, we get non-communicative with our words, and we get more communicative with our body language. And if we can learn, if people can learn to communicate healthily, have a healthy communication, it's how to communicate through conflict. We want to be able to do that. And maybe we should, we're almost out of time already. What we should do maybe is we'll do another one of these on communication, and let's talk about conflict and how we can communicate through conflict. Because if you could master that one thing, you're going to see a huge uptake in flourishing relationships around you, whether it's at work or at home. Because if we could learn how to communicate through conflict, we grow deeper in our relationship. And you and I are examples of that, Chris. It's not that our friendship's been conflict free. In fact, it's been full of conflict because you're a hard person to get along with. So
I'm a long-term investment, Mark.
you're a long-term investment. But it's interesting because when we met at a business event. We were competitors. And I remember walking away from that event thinking, that guy is the biggest arrogant beep, beep, beep that I've ever seen. And I remember not liking you. And then we were at another event and we got to talk a little bit. And then you came to work for me when I owned the telecommunications company. And you came to work for me. And then we really got to know each other. And I realized, under this big, gruff, arrogant, posturing guy, was a teddy bear, a guy who cares deeply for people, who wants to help others be successful. And I just always saw the real you beneath the surface. Once I got past my own, see, what I was seeing when I looked at you was actually a reflection of me. A lot
Mm,
of times when we don't like somebody, if there's something about somebody we don't like, it's actually a mirror showing us something in ourselves we don't like. And I didn't identify it at that first gathering. I didn't identify it as insecurity, but you triggered that insecurity in me. And so that's what happens quite often in relationships, is we actually become mirrors that we hold up to our closest people. And that mirror doesn't, you would always don't like what we see in the mirror, but if we can communicate through it, we can actually learn from each other. We can actually learn. And that's what we did, Chris. Anytime we've had conflict, we've always communicated through it. We have a conversation. We talk about it. We choose forgiveness. Lots of times, I'm sure, but for me, if I'm really torqued, it's like, so frustrating. And very shortly after, it's like, yeah, but he's my best friend and I love the guy. And I just I need to be more patient. I need to be more aware of, maybe he's going through something. See, here's the thing that we need to learn, is that not all conflict is caused by you or the other person. Sometimes it has nothing to do with you. Sometimes it's just a matter of, oh, yes, there's a cause and effect there. Something is going on in their life. And you might have been the closest in proximity to, to have to take it. And so that's,
well, Mark, I can say this real humbly, and that is, I'm really proud and happy that my years of arrogance and stupidity was able to help you become a better human being, and that I was able to serve you that way. So I appreciate
thank you. Thank you. I do. I appreciate it.
it. So, Mark, we're at the top of the hour. I know that it's now Friday night.
Uh,
Go Canucks, by the way, which I think are
yeah,
playing, if I'm correct.
they'll be starting
Um,
shortly. Yeah.
One thing, hey, by the way, Mark, two quick things.
Yeah.
Number one, I think, I don't know if you think it's a good idea, but I think it might be great for our listeners if we invite Lori to come with me on one of these, because
I would love it.
you're getting Chris Dollinger's side of things, but when it comes to trust and communication, I think that it would be
Yeah.
great if the two of us, because you're going to see, we're going to get into some very interesting dialogue. Number
Well,
two, thank you for putting that up, Mark. I encourage anybody, please,
yeah.
it's free. Get on the website, do the blind assessment. You will be amazed at the accuracy
Yeah.
of what that thing does. Third, you want to learn a little bit more about communication. You want to know a bit more about what we're talking about. Maybe go a little deeper and everything like that. Suggest you order a copy of Relationship Matters. Easy to get on the website. Price is phenomenal on that, and I think you'll find that as you can see, it's not a very thick read. It's not like you're going to be in there for like a textbook. You can get through this thing really, really quick. And then the last
Yeah.
thing, Mark, is hey, how come we don't have any sponsors
Well, that's a
for the
good
podcast?
question. And there might be somebody watching saying, you know what? I need to sponsor this podcast because this is a great tool. It's a great business tool. And I want to encourage anybody, share this out. If you know somebody that struggles with communication, we're touching on some pretty deep places, but we're also just giving some real practical stuff here. And that's, we like people walking away with tools in their tool belt. And so make sure you share this out and make sure that you, yeah, invite others to come and join the community. Subscribe, to either Spotify or YouTube, or hit follow whatever. If it's LinkedIn or Facebook, make sure you hit the like button and start to follow me as well. And you're going to get all these updates all the time. But it's a great business tool. It's a great home tool for personal relationships. But that's a great idea, Chris. I think we need some sponsors. So if anybody's listening and they'd love to sponsor this, um, it would be a great brand to put your name to because
Well, and then
we're helping a lot of people.
and I'll let them know when they want to know why would they ever sponsor us. Ask me that when if you're interested, and I'll let you know. And I think you'll find it
Yeah.
compelling. So, with that, Mark, once again, another empowering conversation in the last
Yeah.
60 minutes. I hope everybody takes one thing this week and tries it until next Friday.
Yeah.
No idea what we're going to talk about next week, but as it always, it's going to be fun and exciting.
I think we'll
Um,
continue on with the communication piece. Maybe invite Lori. Let's have her pop in for at least part of it, but maybe for
yeah,
all of it. And maybe she can, you guys could be a living example of, let's walk through a conflict and let people can learn from you.
well, it could be one of the most comedic things you've ever heard in your life.
Or it could be both.
It could be both. Anyways, Mark, good to talk with you.
Thanks, man. Thanks again. Thanks, everybody. We thank you for being part of the Relationship Matters community. We love you all, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Talk to you later.